Last October, Rose Fielding stood at the Walgreens pharmacy counter on West Cole Avenue and quietly told the pharmacist to skip the blood pressure prescription. "Just the one bag today," she said. The pharmacist didn't blink. Rose drove home with Gerald's leftover pills, and without hers, and told herself 1 month wouldn't matter. She'd manage. Today she's at the same counter and she puts everything in the basket. Her prescription, a bottle of vitamins, and a chocolate bar she stopped buying when Gerald left. She pays with her debit card. She doesn't run the math in her head first. That's new. Before she got here, a restaurant contact in Santa Fe who never called back. 5 weeks without really talking to her daughter. And Donna walking through a craft fair aisle and saying, "Bless your heart," loud enough for 2 tables to hear. Here is how it happened, and here is what she learned. Friends, drop a comment. Where are you from, and does your social security check actually last till the end of the month? We'd love to know who's listening. And hit that like button so this story reaches someone who needs to hear it right now. The Walgreens on West Cole Avenue smelled the way all Walgreens smell. Hand sanitizer, a faint sweetness from the candy aisle, the particular flatness of air-conditioned air that has been recycled so many times it no longer resembles any air that has ever been outside. Rose knew the layout by heart. Pharmacy in the back, past the vitamins, past the October clearance display of Halloween candy that was already going half price. She picked up Gerald's remaining prescriptions. His cardiologist hadn't been notified yet that Gerald had relocated, and the refills still came to this address, and she still picked them up because it seemed cruel to let them expire unclaimed, and because the small act of picking them up gave her something to do on Tuesdays. The pharmacist slid her own bag across the counter too. Amlodipine, new prescription, started in September, when her blood pressure decided that the dissolution of a 42-year marriage was exactly the kind of event worth registering. "Actually," Rose said, "just the one bag today. I'll get mine next time." The pharmacist nodded, with the practiced neutrality of someone who had heard every version of this. Rose paid for Gerald's bag, tucked it under her arm, and walked out through the automatic doors into the October air, which in Gallup had the particular dryness that felt like the air was slowly borrowing moisture from your skin. In the car, she sat for a moment before starting the engine. The drive home was 4 minutes. She didn't need to prepare for it. She sat anyway. Gerald had been gone since August. He had left on a Tuesday, which Rose had always considered an unremarkable day, the kind of day nothing happens on. But evidently Gerald had other ideas. With 2 suitcases, the television, his recliner, half the kitchen dishes, a set of screwdrivers, and 42 years of shared life, all of which had fit into a taxi to the building 2 streets over, where Donna from apartment 27 was waiting. Donna sold housewares at the weekend market and was 5 years younger than Rose and had a laugh that carried through walls, which Rose had known about for 11 years as a building fact, the way you know which neighbour's car alarm goes off when it rains. What Gerald had not taken, his remaining prescriptions, 3 framed photos of Karen's children, the smell of cigarette smoke in the hallway closet, which had been there since 2019, when he smoked through a bad winter and thought she didn't notice. And the Janome. The Janome was a white sewing machine, compact and solid, the single genuinely good gift of their marriage. He had given it to her on her 60th birthday, in a year when his relationship with alcohol was going through one of its better intervals, a stretch of 8 or 9 months, the kind that made you think it was over, which was the most dangerous kind of stretch, because it made you trust again. She had always sewn, mostly by hand, occasionally on a borrowed machine. And when the Janome arrived, she had felt a disproportionate gratitude that she understood later was not just for the machine, but for the evidence that he had been paying attention. He had been paying attention, sometimes. That was the complicated truth of 42 years. At home, she sat at the kitchen table with the green folder. Not a nice folder, a dollar store folder she had been using since January to hold receipts and statements, and the single sheet of paper on which she wrote her monthly finances in the small, precise hand of someone who had spent 37 years in a library where neatness was not optional. Social Security, $1,540. That was it. Gerald's SSDI, which had contributed $1,180 when they were still in the same apartment, was now contributing to Donna's household budget, or to Gerald's, or to whatever combination of the two had emerged since August. Rose didn't know, and had decided not to spend energy finding out. Rent, $695. The two-bedroom on Sunset Drive, second floor, which she had lived in for 16 years, and which was too large for one person, and which she had no intention of leaving because the idea of packing was worse than the idea of an empty second bedroom. Medications. Gerald's, $110. She was still buying them. She would stop when she got around to calling the cardiologist's office, which she would do soon. Her own medications, previous. $65 for the one prescription she had been managing for years, plus the new amlodipine, $145. Total, $210. Groceries, $420. That was down from what it had been when 2 people ate from this kitchen, and the reduction gave her no satisfaction. Utilities, phone, internet, $185. Total out, $1,510. Balance, $30. Rose looked at the $30. Then she took out the pharmacy receipt for the amlodipine from September, $145, and folded it once and set it on top of the folder. She did not cross out the new prescription on the budget sheet. She just didn't write it down. If you don't write it down, it's not part of the calculation. This was not logic she would have recognized as her own 3 years ago, but the last 3 years had introduced her to several versions of herself she hadn't met before. She closed the folder. From where she sat, she could see the living room wall, where the television had been. There was a rectangle there now, lighter than the rest of the wallpaper, which was a small blue floral pattern that had seemed cheerful when they chose it, and now seemed like someone else's choice. The rectangle was about 30 inches wide and 20 inches tall, with clean edges, and it looked like a frame from which the picture had been removed, which was, Rose supposed, exactly what it was. She had put nothing there, not a print, not a mirror. She kept meaning to. That evening, Karen called. Karen called on Saturdays at 10 with the precision of a postal train, but she called on a Thursday this week, which meant she was worried. "Mum, how are you actually doing?" "I'm fine, Karen." "Mum, I go out. I go to the grocery store and the library and the pharmacy." "The library isn't going out, Mum. That's where you used to work." "It still counts." "Have you talked to anyone?" "Not me. Anyone else?" "I talked to Celia this morning, in the parking lot." "Celia is 80 years old." "She's very sharp." A pause. In the background, Rose could hear Tyler and Maya arguing about something with the sustained intensity of children who have been indoors too long, and Karen's husband Dale talking to one of them in the steady voice he used for de-escalation, which Rose had always admired. Dale was not a complicated man, but he was a reliable one. And at this point in her life, Rose had more respect for reliability than she had at 30. "Mum, come stay with us. Even just a weekend. The kids would love it." "You're full up, Karen. 4 people in a 3-bedroom. "We have a couch, Mum. You've slept on couches before." "I'm 66. My back doesn't negotiate with couches anymore." "Mum." "I'm adjusting, Karen. Let me adjust." She said it with more firmness than she felt, because she had learned over 37 years at the reference desk that the most useful thing you could say to someone who was worried about you was something definite. Definite things reduced the worry, without requiring you to actually be fine. After she hung up, the apartment was quiet. Gallup was quiet at night. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of a small city that goes to bed early and works hard. And from the window she could see the orange glow at the horizon, where the lights of the West End faded into the high desert dark. She went to bed at 10:30. She lay awake until after 1, running numbers that did not improve with repetition. The amlodipine was $145. 1 month without it was $145. Her blood pressure without medication had been 162/98, which her doctor had described with a measured calm that Rose recognized as a doctor's version of concern. 1 month. At 1:30 she got up, went to the hallway closet for the heavier blanket, and pulled the closet door open. On the floor, under the extra pillow and the box of Gerald's remaining things she had not yet figured out what to do with, was a shoebox. Tan cardboard, the logo of a shoe company. The kind of box that was too useful to throw out, but too specific to repurpose. She would have forgotten it entirely, but someone had written on the lid with a black marker in handwriting she recognized. Scraps. Do not throw. Gerald's handwriting. Gerald, who had never sewn a stitch, who had never opened the box, who had labelled it sometime in the early 2000s when they were reorganising the closet, and had apparently understood, in some way he never spoke out loud, that this was not his box to judge. Rose pulled it out and sat on the floor of the hallway. Inside, fabric. 3 layers deep, carefully folded, the way she had always folded them. Scraps from every sewing project of the last 30 years, sorted by size, the larger pieces on the bottom. Cotton, flannel, polished cotton, a few pieces of velvet she had saved but never used, calico, denim. She went through them the way she went through a card catalogue, systematically, from the bottom up, touching each one. The blue polka dot on white. Karen's first grade dress, 1991. Rose had made it from a pattern in a women's magazine, cutting the fabric on the kitchen floor at midnight because the table was too small, running the borrowed machine, not the Genome didn't exist yet, as quietly as she could so as not to wake Karen, who at 6 years old had strong opinions about being woken. She had finished it at 4 in the morning, pressed it with a damp cloth, and hung it on the closet doorknob so it would be the first thing Karen saw. Karen had worn it until the hem gave out, and then for another month held together with safety pins, because some dresses you don't retire. The green and gold curtain fabric. Kitchen curtains, 1998. They had made the kitchen look like a restaurant, and Gerald had hated them, and Rose had loved them, and they had hung there for 6 years until a grease fire burned one beyond saving, and they replaced both with something Gerald chose, which was beige. The grey stripe. Gerald's proposal shirt, 1982. He had borrowed it from his roommate, and it was 2 sizes too large, and he had thought, apparently sincerely, that wearing an oversized shirt made him look like a serious person. He had been 24. He had been, at 24, before everything else, a person who wanted to be taken seriously, and wasn't entirely sure how. She had always found that endearing. She still did, which made things complicated. Rose sat on the hallway floor for a long time, going through the box. The apartment was quiet around her, the particular quiet of Gallup at 2 in the morning, with the faint sound of wind off the mesa and the occasional car on Cole Avenue, and the neighbour upstairs who worked nights and came home late, and walked in his boots before remembering that other people slept. She got up, carried the box to the kitchen table, and sat down at the Genome. She didn't have a plan. A quilt required a plan, squares calculated, colours coordinated, a design laid out before the first cut. She knew this. She had made plenty of planned things. Tonight she picked up the first piece that came to hand, the green and gold curtain fabric, and the second, a red check she recognised from a tablecloth that had outlasted its usefulness, and she sewed them together. Then a third piece, then a fourth. No pattern, no measurements, just piece to piece, edge to edge. the machine running and her hands moving, and the quiet of the kitchen replaced by the small, busy sound of the genome, which was not the silence of the apartment, which was a different thing entirely. She sewed until 4 in the morning. When she stopped, she looked at what she had made. A patchwork section about 18 inches square, uneven, the seams not quite straight in places, the pieces not quite matched at every corner. A working draft, not a finished thing. She set it on the table next to the shoebox and the folder and her empty coffee cup and looked at all of them together for a moment. Then she went to bed and slept until 7, which was the first time in 6 weeks she had slept more than 4 consecutive hours. Bev Morales knocked at 8:15. Bev lived 1 floor below in apartment 14 and had been Rose's neighbour for 11 years and her friend for 10 of those. She had retired 3 years ago from 29 years of teaching kindergarten in the Gallup-McKinley schools, and the experience had left her with an inexhaustible supply of energy, a very loud voice, and the unshakable conviction that most problems could be solved if you simply got people moving. She was 63, small, with short silver hair and an opinion about everything. And she was the person who had brought a casserole the week after Gerald left and was the only neighbour who had never asked Rose how she was managing, which Rose had concluded was either thoughtlessness or wisdom, and had decided was wisdom. She was holding 2 cups of coffee from the gas station down the block. "You were up," Bev said. "I saw your light at 2 a.m. "I was sewing." "At 2 a.m. "I found my fabric box." Bev handed her a coffee and looked past her into the kitchen. The genome, the shoebox, the patchwork section on the table. "Oh," Bev said, and walked past Rose to the table. She picked up the patchwork, turned it, held it toward the window light. She was quiet for a moment in the way she was very rarely quiet. "Rose, you have to sell these." "It's a scrap of fabric, Bev. It's not even finished." "Finish it, and then sell it." "I'm a retired librarian. I'm not a quilter." "You literally just quilted." "I was awake at 2 in the morning. I wasn't running a business." Bev set the patchwork down with the particular care of someone handling an argument they intend to win. "I'm putting you on the building Facebook group." "Bev." But Bev had her phone out. The post went up that afternoon with a photo Bev had taken on her phone. The patchwork section on the kitchen table, still technically a fragment of a quilt rather than a quilt, but lit by the afternoon window light in a way that made it look intentional and warm. The caption read, "Our neighbour Rose Fielding makes beautiful handmade quilts from her own fabric collection. If you're interested, reach out. She's on the 2nd floor." Rose saw it at 8 that evening and called Bev. "You put up a photo of an unfinished scrap." "It looks finished." "It isn't." "Then finish it and 3 more and you'll have something to sell." "Rose, I've seen quilts at the craft fair in the church parking lot that weren't half as good as what you do, and they sold for $40 a piece. Yours are better. Charge more." Rose hung up and sat at the genome and thought about this for approximately 4 minutes. Then she started sewing. She called Ruth Hensley on a Saturday, a former librarian colleague now living in Albuquerque, with whom she shared the particular bond of people who spent decades organising information for other people and occasionally forgot to organise their own lives. She didn't call about quilting. She called because she needed to hear the voice of someone who had known her before Gerald left, before the apartment got quiet, before the $30 balance. "Ruth, tell me something that isn't about me." "My son got a promotion. My tomatoes died. I found a first edition of something at a garage sale and I'm pretending it's worth more than it is." "Your turn." "I started quilting again at 2 in the morning from an old shoebox." "Okay." "Bev put me on Facebook." "Bev has the energy of 3 people and the subtlety of none. Did anything happen?" "A few people reached out. I don't know what to do with that." A pause. Ruth had the quality of good librarians everywhere. She listened to what wasn't being said as carefully as what was. Rose, you spent 37 years helping people find what they needed. Maybe it's time to figure out what you need. That's either very wise or a greeting card. Can't it be both? Rose made the first complete quilt on a Wednesday, 10 days after finding the shoebox. She finished the edging just before noon, pressed the whole thing on the kitchen table with a damp cloth, and stood back. It was full size, 54 by 68 inches, put together from 30 squares of varying sizes. The blue polka dot in the upper left, the green and gold curtain alongside a piece of rust orange flannel she didn't remember the origin of. Gerald's proposal shirt, the grey stripe, in the lower right quadrant. She had not planned it there, and when she noticed it, she almost took it out, and then didn't, because the quilt needed the grey, and because the past was in the past, but that didn't mean it hadn't happened. She stepped back and looked at it. Then she went to find Bev. Bev looked at it for a long time. Then she said, $40 was too low. Charge $45. That's still too low. The batting alone costs more than that. Then what's your number? Rose had calculated it that morning, twice, to make sure. Materials per quilt. Batting at $17, backing fabric at $8, thread at $2, $1 or $2 in miscellaneous. Total cost, around $28. Her time, roughly 12 hours per quilt at the current pace, though she was getting faster. If her time was worth anything at all, the quilt was worth considerably more than $45. 75, she said. Maybe 80? Bev looked at her the way she had looked at 5-year-olds who announced they were going to build a rocket ship. Not discouraging, appraising. Start at 75. See what happens. Her first real customer was Helen Park from apartment 1B, a retired nurse, diabetic, with a small white dog of uncertain heritage named Biscuit, who had an established practice of appearing at people's doors when he sensed food or warmth in the vicinity. Helen had seen the Facebook post and knocked on a Tuesday with a directness Rose appreciated. Is this washable? 60 degrees, gentle cycle, hang to dry. Good. I have a granddaughter in Phoenix. It would be a birthday gift. How much? 75. Helen opened her wallet and counted out 3 20s and a 10 and a 5, because Helen, like Rose, was of a generation that kept actual money in her wallet. She picked up the quilt, turned it over, looked at the backing. This is the real thing, she said. It was not quite a compliment and not quite a certification. It was something more considered than either. Biscuit sniffed the edge of the quilt and looked up at Rose with the calm appraisal of a dog who has decided someone is trustworthy. 2 weeks later, a woman named Pam, from the Facebook post someone Rose didn't know, messaged about 3 quilts for a church gift table. She needed them in 2 weeks. Rose said yes. She did not ask for a deposit, because asking felt presumptuous, because she was still in the early stage of believing that what she made was worth anything, and that belief was fragile enough that imposing conditions on it felt risky. Pam did not come. She did not message to cancel. She did not respond to Rose's follow-up. The 3 quilts sat on the living room couch, and Rose looked at them for a few days, and then moved them to the bedroom, and eventually put them in the closet. The batting for those 3 had cost $51. She wrote in the margin of her planning notebook, 50% deposit, always, before cutting. She underlined it twice. Then she added, say it like a policy, not a favour. Around this time, Bev mentioned her nephew. David works at a restaurant in Santa Fe. They're trying to do this local artisan thing. Table linens, bread baskets, that kind of thing. I told him about you. He said he'd reach out. Rose made 2 sample pieces, a small quilted table runner, 9 by 36 inches, and a fabric basket liner in complementary colours. She spent $11 on materials and a week's worth of evenings. David did not call. He did not email. Bev, when she ran into him at a family gathering 3 weeks later, said he had been very busy and would definitely follow up. He did not follow up. Rose put the table runner and basket liner in the donation box for the library sale and moved on, because she had spent 37 years watching people not return what they'd borrowed and had long since made peace with the fact that follow-through was not evenly distributed. She was at the kitchen table one evening, cutting squares for a new quilt, when she heard Gerald's voice in her head. Not a memory exactly, more like an echo. The specific intonation he used when she was working on something he didn't understand. "Who's going to want that, Ray?" He had called her Ray since their first year together, a shortening she had never asked for and had eventually accepted as one of the small intimacies of long marriage, the kind that become invisible until they're gone. He wasn't here. The voice was a habit her brain hadn't broken yet. She cut another square. Green and cream checked cotton, from a blouse she'd bought in 2007 and worn out in 2012. 4 inches by 4 inches, clean edge. The voice could wait. Karen called on Saturday. "Mum, did you sell anything?" "1 quilt, to Helen downstairs." "What about the others?" "I have 4 ready, and 2 more planned." "Are people buying?" A pause that was 1 beat too long. "I had a situation with a deposit," Rose said. Karen was quiet for a moment. "Meaning someone didn't pay?" "Meaning I didn't ask for one and I should have." "Mum." Karen's voice had that particular quality, not quite exasperation, not quite tenderness, the sound of someone who loves you and is watching you learn something the hard way. "Can I ask, why didn't you ask?" "Because it felt like I was being presumptuous about the value of what I was making." A longer pause. "Mum, I've seen these quilts. On Bev's phone, she sends me photos. They're extraordinary. You're not being presumptuous." Rose didn't say anything. "Bev told me about the church craft fair, St. Michael's, November 15th. You should go." "Bev already told me." "And?" "And I'll think about it." "Mum, go." After they hung up, Rose sat with the new squares laid out on the table, 12 of them, arranged in a pattern she'd been working out in her head for a week. The colours moved from warm to cool, left to right, with a deliberate unevenness that was not quite symmetry and not quite randomness, but something between them, the way real things are. She pinned the first 2 squares together and pressed the foot pedal. St. Michael's Parish held its fall craft fair in the parking lot on a Saturday in November, under a white tent that flapped in the desert wind, with the sound of someone clapping slowly. Bev drove them in her 2009 Civic, which ran through what appeared to be a combination of regular maintenance and Bev's personal conviction that the car would not dare break down. They arrived at 8:30, and Bev unloaded Rose's quilts with the efficiency of a woman who had once organised the annual supply delivery for a 30-child classroom. Rose's table was at the far end, corner position, next to a woman selling handmade soap and 2 tables down from a man selling green chili jam and honey. Not a high-traffic spot. You had to walk past the baked goods, the children's clothes, the painted pottery and the jewellery before you reached Rose's end, and most people's budgets were spent before they got there. This was fine. Rose arranged the quilts with the quiet precision she brought to everything. Largest in the back, folded to show the pattern, smallest in front where they could be touched. The November light in Gallup was thin and clean, the kind of light that doesn't warm you but makes everything look more itself. And in that light the quilts looked. Rose stepped back and looked at them the way she looked at a display she had built at the library, assessing for a patron's eyes rather than her own. They looked right. The colours moved across the table like something from a different season than the grey November air. The woman with the soap, whose name was Ida, looked over and said, Those are beautiful. You make all of them? Yes. How long does one take? About 12 hours, depending. Ida nodded slowly, with the appreciation of someone who makes things by hand and understands what 12 hours means. People came. They touched the quilts, which was what Bev had said would happen and what did happen. People who would scroll past a photo without stopping, would pick up a corner of fabric and hold it, feel the weight of the batting, run a thumb along the stitching. They said, "These are beautiful." They said, "Did you make all of these yourself?" They said, "How much do you charge?" When Rose said $80, they considered this, and most of them set the quilt down and moved toward the baked goods. One woman said, "I could get a fleece throw at Target for $15. "You could," Rose said. "$80 seems like a lot for a blanket." "It probably does," Rose said. The woman left. Rose straightened the quilt she had picked up and looked at the parking lot and thought about nothing in particular. Then Bev's cat Mango appeared. Mango was a large orange tabby who belonged technically to Bev and in practice to the entire second floor of their building, where he had established a circuit of apartments he considered part of his territory. He had arrived at the craft fair in a way that Bev later explained at some length, but that never quite resolved into a coherent account. Something about the car window being cracked for air, and Mango's commitment to going where Bev went, and a series of events that Bev described as, he just materialised. He materialised onto Rose's display table at approximately 11 o'clock, walked the full length of it with the confidence of a health inspector, circled twice on the largest quilt, the warm to cool one Rose had spent the most time on, and lay down in the centre, with his chin on his paws and his eyes half closed, in the satisfied expression of a cat who has located the optimal warm surface. Ida from the soap table laughed. A woman walking past stopped to look. A child said, "Kitty," with profound conviction and pulled her mother's hand. Bev took a photo on her phone with the speed of someone who had learned not to hesitate around good moments. That evening, the photo appeared on the building Facebook group, on the local Gallup community page, and, via Karen in Albuquerque, on a quilting group with 1,400 members. By Sunday morning, the quilt with Mango on it had been seen by more people than anything Rose had ever made, and 2 people in the quilting group had messaged to ask where they could purchase one. "Mum," Karen said when she called, "Mango, keep him in the photos." "Karen, I can't bring a cat to every transaction." "Not every transaction, just the listing photos. People buy from listings with animals. It's documented." "I am not going to document whether cats improve quilt sales." "I'll document it. You just keep the photos." Rose looked at the photo on Bev's phone. The quilt looked warm. Mango looked profoundly comfortable. The overall effect was of something genuinely inviting, the kind of image that made you want to own the thing in it. "Fine," she said, "but I'm not listing him as a co-creator." Bev cackled. Mango, who was at that moment on the kitchen chair behind them, opened one eye and closed it again. It was around noon when Donna came through. Rose saw her before Donna saw her. Donna in a rust-coloured puffer coat, carrying a tote bag and moving through the craft fair with the ease of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. She bought a bar of soap from Ida. She picked up a jar of green chili jam and put it back. She stopped at a table of handmade ornaments, bought 2. And then she looked down the row and saw Rose. She came over, not with hesitation, with the specific deliberateness of someone who has decided that acknowledging a thing is more powerful than avoiding it. She looked at the quilts, looked at Rose, said in a voice that carried easily to Ida's table and probably to the honey table beyond, "Gerald mentioned you'd taken up crafts. Bless your heart." She smiled the smile of someone who means exactly what they say and knows it lands. Then she moved on, tote bag swinging. Rose did not move. Bev made a sound beside her, a compressed, hissing intake of breath that in other circumstances might have preceded a speech. Rose put her hand on Bev's arm without looking at her. Let it go. Rose, let it go, Bev. Bev let it go. Ida was looking at the jam jar with sudden great interest. The honey seller at the end of the row was examining his labels. Rose straightened a quilt that didn't need straightening. By 2 o'clock, it was clear that no one was going to buy a quilt that day. Rose began folding them, carefully by the seams, the way she folded everything, the way she had refolded returned books before reshelving them for 37 years. Bev folded the ones on the near side without comment. The wind had picked up and the tent was snapping. The honey seller, his name was Roy. He was from a town east of Gallup, and he had been watching the whole day with the patient attention of someone who had spent a lot of time waiting for things. Walked over as Rose was loading the last quilt into the bag. First craft fair? Yes. First time I came out, I sold exactly nothing. Drove an hour each way. Went home and thought about quitting. He picked up a quilt she hadn't packed yet, the blue and cream one, the smallest, and looked at it. Didn't quit. Now I sell out every time. He handed it back. Takes a few times. People have to see you here before they trust you're coming back. Rose took the quilt. Thank you, she said. In the car on the way home, Bev drove and Rose looked out the window, and neither of them spoke for the first few minutes, which was its own kind of communication. Then Bev said, Roy's right, you know. I know. And Donna is Bev. I was going to say a very limited person. That's generous of you. Bev almost smiled. I have my moments. At home, Rose unloaded the quilts and put them in the bedroom. 6 quilts, folded in a stack on the chair by the window. $110 spent on materials. $0 earned. In her coat pocket, a business card she had found on the waiting room floor at the medical clinic in September and pocketed out of a librarian's reflexive tidiness. She had forgotten it was there. She took it out now and read it. Linda Tso, Director of Resident Services, Gallup Senior Living Centre. A local address, a phone number. She set the card on the kitchen counter next to the Genome. She sat in the living room without turning on the light. The rectangle on the wall where the TV had been, the orange glow of the street lamp through the curtains, the small sounds of the building settling around her, the upstairs neighbour coming home, the familiar thud of boots going off near the door. She sat for a long time. In her head, Donna's voice. Bless your heart. And under it, quieter and more insistent, her own. You are a retired librarian. You are 66 years old. This is not what people like you do. She thought about what people like her meant and couldn't come up with a definition that satisfied her. The phone rang at 9. Unknown number, local area code. She answered. Is this Rose Fielding? My name is Linda Tso. I was at the craft fair today at St. Michael's. I got your number from a woman named Bev Morales. I hope that's all right. It's fine, Rose said, and reached over to turn on the lamp. Linda Tso's voice was careful and direct, with the quality of someone who had learnt to say important things efficiently because there was never enough time. She explained. She was the Director of Resident Services at Gallup Senior Living, a care facility for older adults on the east side of town. She had arrived at the craft fair late and had seen Rose's table from a distance as Rose was packing up. She had walked over to look at the quilts just as Rose finished loading the last one into the bag. She had stood there for a moment, looking at an empty table, and then found Bev. I'd like to come see them, Linda said. If that's possible, are you free this week? She came Tuesday evening. Rose had laid the quilts out on the bed and the couch and the kitchen table, one per surface, the way she would have laid out a reading display at the library, visible, accessible, each one with space to be seen on its own terms. Linda Tso was a Navajo woman in her early 50s, compact and precise, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and the manner of someone who ran a complicated operation on an insufficient budget and had made peace with the math a long time ago. She moved through the apartment looking at the quilts the way Rose moved through a new collection, systematically, touching, assessing, occasionally picking one up and holding it toward the light. She didn't speak for several minutes. Rose made tea. When Linda sat down at the kitchen table, she folded her hands in front of her. Not a nervous gesture, a settling one, and said, "I need to tell you something about what I do before I tell you what I want to ask." Rose sat down. "I run a facility for 82 people, mostly women, mostly over 70. Some have family who visits, some have no one. We do the best we can with what we have, which is never enough, which is true everywhere, which is not an excuse, but a fact." She paused. "Do you know what the rooms look like?" "No." "Grey walls, institutional beds, identical blankets, thin, synthetic, the colour of old concrete. Everything standardised, everything the same. It's what the budget covers. It's what every facility that runs on Medicaid reimbursement looks like." She was quiet for a moment. "I've been trying to change things for 3 years. I bring plants, I put up photographs, I rotate artwork from the community college. But the beds, the thing people sleep under, that's harder to change because it goes through procurement, and procurement has preferences." Rose listened. "My grandmother made quilts," Linda said. "She was Diné from the Chusca Mountains. She didn't make them as art. She made them because winters were cold and fabric was scarce and you used what you had. But there was something else in it too. She said, when you sleep under something someone made with their hands, you know you haven't been forgotten." She looked at the quilt on the kitchen table, the warm to cool one, the one Mango had chosen. "I don't know if that's a Diné idea or just an old woman's idea, but I've seen what it does." She told Rose about a resident named Maria Begay, 84 years old, advanced dementia, who had not spoken to another person in nearly 2 years. Linda had brought a plaid throw from her own home, placed it on Maria's bed. Maria had touched it, stroked the fabric and said, "My mother had one like this." 2 years of silence. "It was a $12 throw from a discount store," Linda said. "I've thought about what it would have been if it was something like these." She wanted to buy quilts, 5 to start, for the rooms with the most isolated residents. The long-term ward, the memory care wing, the residents who had the least contact with the outside world. She would pay $185 each through a facilities contract, payment to Rose's account within 30 days of delivery. She would need Rose to register as a sole proprietor. "Your daughter can help you with that. It takes about an hour." Rose was quiet for a moment. In her head, she was running the arithmetic. Not the monthly budget arithmetic, a different kind. The kind that moves forward rather than in circles. 5 quilts at $185, $925. Minus materials, around $40 per quilt. Net, just over $700. Per month, if the arrangement held, that was $700. Plus whatever she made selling to individuals. She was not going to say what she was thinking, which was, "This changes the number." Instead, she said, "I want to be honest with you. I've sold 1 quilt. I'm not a professional." "I know," Linda said. "I'm not hiring a professional. I'm hiring these." She touched the corner of the quilt on the table. "These are made. They exist. That's not a beginning. That's already something." They talked for another hour, about materials, about the care residents' sensitivities to synthetic fabrics, about sizes, about colours. Linda wanted warmth, reds, golds, deep blues, greens. "We have enough grey," she said. "What we need is something that looks like someone chose it. Not for a ward, for a person." After Linda left, Rose sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and wrote down the terms of what they had discussed. The Janome sat to her left, quiet, the needle threaded with the dark blue she had been using all week. The shoebox was on the shelf above it, lighter now, the top layers of scraps already used. On the lid, Gerald's handwriting. Scraps. Do not throw. She looked at it for a moment. She hadn't thought about Gerald in 3 days. She noticed this the way you notice a sound has stopped. Not with drama, just with a kind of small, factual surprise. She went back to her notepad. The following week, she cut out the 5th quilt's squares. This one she planned more carefully, because it was going to be the last of what she currently had from the shoebox, and she wanted to use what remained with intention. In the centre, she placed the blue polka dot on white, Karen's first-grade dress. She had been saving it, not knowing for what, and now she knew. It would go in the centre, the fixed point around which the other pieces moved outward. The warm colours, the patterned fabrics, the pieces whose stories she knew, and the pieces she had simply loved when she found them in Bev's donation bags. She spent an extra hour on the stitching of the centre square. The needle through the blue polka dot exactly, without pulling. Right. She delivered the 5 quilts to the facility on a Thursday afternoon in a large canvas tote she had borrowed from Bev. Linda met her in the lobby and walked her down the hall. The hall smelled of institutional cleaning products and something underneath that. Rose identified it the way she identified the smell of a library's backstacks, the smell of people's accumulated time in a place. Linoleum floors, walls with printed wellness posters, doors with small whiteboards for names and notes. Linda opened the door to room 7. 4 beds, 2 occupied. The woman nearest the window was small and very thin, with white hair and the kind of absolute stillness of someone who is mostly elsewhere. On her tray table, a glass of water, and a paperback with a bookmark in it that had not moved, Rose guessed, in some time. Rose unfolded the 5th quilt, the one with the blue polka dot at the centre, and laid it over the standard issue blanket on the bed. The colours caught the afternoon light from the window. Warm amber, soft green, the blue and white of the centre square. The woman opened her eyes. She looked at the quilt for a moment. Then she reached out her hand, thin, the veins visible under pale skin, the hand of someone who had worked with their hands for decades, and whose hands now worked at the smaller task of living carefully. She touched the fabric. Her fingers found the blue polka dot at the centre and rested there. "My granddaughter had a dress in this pattern," she said. Her voice was soft and a little distant, the voice of someone speaking from somewhere that wasn't quite the room. "A long time ago." Rose stood at the foot of the bed and said nothing, because there was nothing that needed saying. Linda was in the doorway, also quiet. After a moment, she stepped back into the hall, and Rose followed, and Linda pulled the door almost closed. They stood in the corridor. "Okay," Linda said after a moment. "Okay," Rose said. Linda signed the delivery acknowledgement on the hood of a supply cart in the hallway because that was where the pen was. She handed Rose a copy. "I'm going to call my colleague at Farmington Care Centre. They have 65 residents. She's been asking me for referrals for local suppliers for a year. If she calls, is that all right?" "Yes," Rose said. On the bus home, she had taken the bus because parking near the facility was difficult and because she wanted to sit and look out the window. Rose did the new arithmetic. Gallup Senior Living, 5 quilts per month, 725 net. Farmington, starting at 3 per month if it came through, roughly 430 net. Individual sales, conservatively 2 per month at $80, 130 net after materials. Total monthly quilting income, roughly 1,250 net. Social Security, 1,540. Total, 2,790. Out, rent 695, medications 210, her own restored to the list, all of them. Groceries 420, utilities 185, miscellaneous 100. Total out 1,610. Balance $1,180 per month. Rose looked out the bus window at the mesa in the late afternoon light, which was doing what New Mexico light does in November, making ordinary things look like they were being shown to you for the first time. She called Karen that evening, not on Saturday, not on schedule, just called. Karen, I need help registering as a sole proprietor. A pause. Mum, what happened? I got a contract with a care facility, 5 quilts a month, and possibly a second one in Farmington. A longer pause. In the background, Rose could hear the television and Tyler's voice, and the specific quality of a house with children in it, which was not silence, but was its own kind of warmth. Mum, Karen said, I've been looking at the photos Bev sends me. Bev sends you photos? Every time you finish one, she sends me a photo and a caption. The captions are… Karen laughed, a short, surprised sound. Bev's captions are something. She writes things like, another masterwork from the second floor. Rose was quiet. Mum, she's right. They're extraordinary. I don't know how you've been making these your whole life and not… Karen stopped. How are you, actually? Rose thought about this. The word Karen was reaching toward was probably happy, and it didn't quite fit. Too large, too conclusive, like a word that belongs to a different chapter. But something fit. I'm occupied, Rose said. Every day I have something to do that I'm supposed to do. That's different from before. A beat. Then Karen said, I'll do the registration tonight. Send me your social security number and your business name. I don't have a business name. Make one up. Fielding Quilts. Perfect. Done. A pause. Mum, can I also redo your Facebook listing? The photo with mango is good, but the description is… Mum, you wrote handmade blankets for sale and put your zip code. That describes them. I'm going to write something with more texture. People buy stories, Mum. The quilt has a story. Let me tell it. Rose thought about this. The story is, I found a shoebox in my closet and I couldn't sleep. That is actually a good story. Can I use it? Use whatever you want. She hung up and sat in the kitchen for a moment, the notepad in front of her with the arithmetic on it, the Genome to her left. Then she got up, because there was a quilt to start, and she had promised herself she would finish the next one before the week was out. In January, Bev came by with a message from the priest at St. Michael's. Father Ruiz wants to know if you'd make baptism quilts. Small ones, baby size, about 30 by 40. They baptize 5 or 6 infants a month, and the families always want to give something. He's thinking paler colours, whites, yellows, soft blues, and simple patterns, nothing busy. He said the parish would promote you if you wanted, mention you in the bulletin. Rose wrote it in her planner. Baptism quilts, St. Michael's, sizes 30 by 40, colours soft. Ask Father Ruiz about quantity. Below it she wrote, call Farmington, follow up on timing. Below that, new batting order, need enough for March. Below that, because she had noticed it and it seemed worth noting, Gerald. 3 days since I thought about him. First time. She looked at that last line for a moment. Then she moved on to the next entry because there was work to do, and the work was waiting, and it had been waiting a long time. That night, she sat at the Janome with the lamp on and the desert quiet outside and the building sounds she had learned to read like a library's own particular language. The neighbour upstairs, the distant sound of a car on Cole Avenue, the refrigerator with its hum that Gerald had always meant to fix. The machine ran and the fabric moved under her hands and the new squares accumulated on the table beside her. And somewhere in the hour between 9 and 10, she stopped thinking about what the quilt was going to be and just let it be what it was. On the wall across the room, the rectangle where the television had been was still empty. She had thought, off and on, about putting something there, a print maybe, or a small quilt, decorative, from the pieces she liked best, the ones that were too beautiful to cut into a bed quilt and had been waiting in the new box she had started when the shoebox ran out. She hadn't decided. The rectangle didn't bother her anymore. It was just a lighter patch on the small blue floral wallpaper, the shape left by something that had gone, and space that belonged now to whatever came next. She would know when she knew. The Janome ran. Outside the window, Gallop settled into the particular quiet of a desert town at night, and the stars above the mesa were doing what they do when the air is dry and the light is low, making themselves very clear, the way things do when there is nothing in the way. If you are sitting somewhere tonight, looking at a box you have kept for 30 years without knowing why, here is what Rose Fielding would tell you. The thing in the box is not what you think it is. It is not a hobby. It is not a way to pass the time. It is evidence of something you already know how to do, something you have been doing quietly for decades while other things demanded your attention. The market didn't want her quilts at first. The craft fair didn't sell a single one. The restaurant contact in Santa Fe never called back. None of that was the point. The point was the shoebox, the midnight, the Janome on the table, and the slow understanding that the work she had always done for free was worth something. Not because someone told her so, but because she decided it was, and then she found the person who agreed. If you found a way to turn what you already know into something that sustains you, financially or otherwise, share it in the comments. What was in your shoebox? What did it take to open it? Rose reads the comments, usually in the evening, between finishing a quilt and going to bed, with a cup of tea she has finally started buying the good kind of again. Like this post so that those who need to see this story right now will see it. And subscribe. Here we share stories about people who stopped being shy and started making money doing what they do best.